In the previous video, we have discussed briefly about the Rohingyas' protracted displacement. In this episode, we will know about who the Rohingya are. Emerged over many centuries from a mixed population of different ethnic groups, the Rohingya had been living in the region before the 9th century AD. Contrary to the Myanmar narrative, the Rohingya are not recent migrants. They have been staying in Arakan, today's Rakhine state, for more than 1,000 years. Historical scholarship shows that Arakan's early population was shaped primarily by Indo-Aryan communities linked to the Indian subcontinent, however separated from mainland Myanmar by the Indo-Burman Hill Range. This created a local community with deep historical, linguistic, and archaeological roots in the Arakan region. Geographically, Arakan or Rakhine occupies the west coast of Myanmar. For centuries, it acted as the gateway for Western traders through Sittwe and Kyaukphyu. Arakan is separated from central Burma by southern Indo-Burman mountain range, which historically limited inland interaction. As a result, Arakan developed its own cultural and social identity. Frequent interactions and centuries of trade with Western traders, Indian and Burmese people, had made Arakan a melting pot, helping to create its own identity over the years. Evidence of this cultural synergy can be traced back historically. The Classical Journal of 1811 identifies 3 languages spoken in the Burma Empire, including a direct reference to Rohingya. The Rohingya speak Rohingya or Ruenga. This is an Indo-Aryan language, part of the Bengali Assamese branch. That alone suggests descent from these pre-9th century Indo-Aryan inhabitants. In contrast, the largely Buddhist Rakhine, who share Tibeto-Burman ancestry, are believed to have arrived later, around the 9th to 10th century AD, crossing the Arakan Mountains from central Burma. This predates the inhabitants of the Rohingya in the Arakan region before the arrival of the Tibeto-Burman communities from central Myanmar, firmly establishing that the Rohingya have been living in the region for thousands of years. Through cultural harmony, they have become an integral part of the land, Arakan. Inscriptions from the Hindu temples of the 8th century AD at Anandra Chandra, located in Rakhine State's Marauk-Yu town, show strong linguistic and stylistic similarities with Indian inscriptions. Ananda stone pillar inscription at Marauk-Yu, such as Arakandesh, refers to the land as a term rooted in Rohingya usage. By contrast, the Rakhine refer to the land as Rakhine Prey. This linguistic continuity points to a long-standing Rohingya presence in Arakan as early as pre-9th century AD. From as early as the 7th century, Arakan was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. Hindus, Buddhists, and Muslims lived side by side. Islam arrived through trade networks linking Arakan with India and Arabia, which can be traced back to the 8th centuries onwards, and over time became dominant among the descendants of the early Indo-Aryan settlers, identified today as the Rohingya. Across centuries, Rohingya culture absorbed Arabic, Persian, Bengali, and Mughal influences, reflecting Arakan's deep engagement with West through the Indian subcontinent. Besides, their cultural presence in coastal Arakan grew through centuries of local settlement, trade, and exchange across the Bay of Bengal. This wider Indo-Islamic connectivity was also visible at the level of the Arakanese court. During the Marauk-Yu period, several Buddhist Arakan kings adopted Muslim honorific titles alongside their native titles, and issued coins inscribed with Persian-Arabian inscriptions and the Kalima, the Islamic declaration of faith. Through participation in the social and economic life of the Arakan polities, the Rohingyas contributed to a long-standing multicultural frontier. With the arrival of the Tibeto-Burman Rakhine around 1000 AD, Arakan evolved into an even more diverse melting pot, where multiple communities coexisted and contributed to a shared social and cultural landscape. So how did the Rohingya become marginalized? The recent problems can be traced back from the Burmese annexation of Arakan in 1784. British colonial rule following the First Anglo-Burmese War, 1824 to 1826, again separated Arakan from central Burma. The political separation of Burma through the Government of Burma Act, 1935, from British India in 1937 began a new era. While the British India was grappling with internal political struggles and the beginning of the Second World War, Myanmar, Burma, remained largely out of focus. The leaders of Myanmar gradually changed the state institutions, citizenship rules, and national policies. When focused towards the Rohingya, this process progressively excluded and discriminated against them. As a result, the Rohingya question emerged as a modern 20th century nation-state problem. The term Rohingya, first used in the 1950s, is a self-chosen identity. Experts say it unites the community under a collective heritage. As we have learnt in the beginning, their ancient linguistic lineage can be traced back as early as pre-9th century AD. The use of the term Rohingya therefore reflects the urge to reassert their ancestral heritage. Rohang comes from the old name for Arakan, while Gya means from, signifying their deep ties to the land. The United Nations has described them as one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. Today, with around 3.5 million people dispersed worldwide, the Rohingya continue to preserve their heritage and strive for a peaceful sense of belonging. The Rohingya crisis is the consequence of political transformations that unfolded during the 20th century. At the time of independence, Burma's 1947 constitution enshrined inclusive citizenship principles based on birth and descent, recognizing Arakanese Muslims as full citizens. Senior leaders of independent Burma, including Aung San and Prime Minister U Nu, publicly affirmed equality for all peoples of the Union. Rohingyas were active in public life, represented in parliament, included in state media and encyclopedias, and organized student unions at the University of Rangoon. On September 25, 1954, Prime Minister U Nu explicitly referred to the Rohingya as nationals of Burma in a radio broadcast, reinforcing their accepted status within the post-independence polity. After the 1962 coup, when General Ne Win's military government came into power, the process of implementing Rohingya citizenship rights was suspended, and previously issued documents recognizing their citizenship were no longer accepted, resulting in statelessness. In the decades that followed, Myanmar experienced prolonged internal conflicts involving various ethnic groups. Under Ne Win's regime, citizenship was redefined through denial of rights, coercive state practices. Despite their long presence, the Rohingya have faced ongoing challenges in gaining official recognition. Under Myanmar's 1982 citizenship law, the Rohingya were not listed among the country's 135 official ethnic groups. As citizenship is a prerequisite for voting and standing in elections, this law effectively excluded Rohingya from meaningful participation in elections and access to parliament, leading to decades of disenfranchisement and statelessness. Various ID systems, from white cards to verification cards, provided limited rights but not recognition. Over the late 20th and early 21st centuries, there were several major waves of expulsions, including forced movement into Bangladesh, widely documented by humanitarian agencies, human rights organizations, and UN investigators. Each of these moments expelled Rohingya families away from their centuries-old homeland, and since the late 1970s, evolving policies and shifting political landscapes in Rakhine have led many to seek safety and stability, mainly in neighbouring Bangladesh, and later in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and beyond. In the 1990s, the region's name was officially changed from Arakan to Rakhine by the Myanmar military government, officially privileging one ethnic identity over the other. This laid the groundwork for the systematic exclusion of the Rohingya. So far, we have understood that hostility toward the Rohingya was not the result of ancient ethnic conflict. It emerged through state-driven narratives that denied the Rohingyas' historical legitimacy, often using racist and anti-Muslim language. These narratives ignored Arakan's plural past and its long-standing Muslim population. Over time, the fusion of Buddhist identity with state power transformed religious difference into political hostility, turning an indigenous people with over 1,000 years of history into outsiders in their own land. Therefore, the ordeal of the Rohingya is not a matter of recent migration, but a story of an indigenous people whose centuries-old roots in Arakan were disrupted by 20th century political transformation. In today's episode, we have understood that the Rohingya are an ancestral people of Arakan with more than 1,000 years of continuous presence. It emerged from modern state policies, not ancient ethnic conflict. The Rohingya crisis is a displacement by design. In the next episode, we will talk about what protracted refugee situation is and how Rohingya crisis turned into a protracted one.